Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, Marketing and Communications for the Consumer Technology Association, Jean Foster.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second day of CES 2019. My name is Jean Foster. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the Consumer Technology Association, and I'm thrilled to be here with you to introduce this next session. I actually have spent most of my career in the tech and telecoms industry, and when I started, which was quite a few years ago, a huge sales deal that we made was a 2 megabit circuit sold to financial traders in the City of London. Yes, people, 2 megabit was once the very big thing in telecom. Today, we are on the brink of 5G. We're going to have gigabits of data connecting our homes, connecting our cars to the cities we drive through, allowing us to manage our health through digital applications, and enabling instant access to large amounts of content. And CES is the home for all things 5G. Global operators are here with us this week in Las Vegas to find partners and applications for our 5G future. And together, they'll demonstrate how 5G will transform our lives. CES is the only global event that brings 5G and the mobile ecosystem together. This week, you can see 5G across our show floor, in our conference programming, and on our keynote stages. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce MediaLink founder, chairman, and CEO, Michael Kassan. MediaLink serves companies at the intersection of media, marketing, advertising, technology, entertainment, and finance. Michael advises his clients on navigating the age of digital disruption and is a frequent commentator on the pressing topics of impacting the future of marketing. Please join me in welcoming Michael to the CES keynote stage.
Thank you, Jen. The last time I was in this theater, Bruno Mars was on this stage. I can dance pretty well, but I can't carry a tune, so I don't want to set your expectations too high. A lot of us were here in Las Vegas 8 years ago for the coming out of 4G. We were in awe at that time. We thought, and we were right, that 4G was going to change the way people communicate. But as they say, we ain't seen nothing yet. CES 2019 is, for all intents and purposes, the dawn of 5G. For real. 5th generation wireless technology is going to give us incredible speed, more responsiveness, and greater connectivity across devices. It will turbocharge our mobile communication, absolutely. But it will do so much more. 5G will transform the healthcare relationships between doctors and patients. It will completely redefine the notion of watching a game with new and immersive experience for fans. The same goes for entertainment. It will certainly propel AR and VR from interesting trends to viable communication opportunities. Are we ready? Today, we have an opportunity to talk to someone who is at the absolute vortex of 5G, and as well, the impact it will have on communications and marketing. As the CEO of AT&T Communications, John Donovan oversees the AT&T relationship with 150 million US consumer connections and millions upon millions of businesses. As well, AT&T is the largest pay TV provider in the US with more than 25 million customers and is responsible for, as I said, about 150 million wireless subscribers and connections. AT&T provides high-speed internet connections to 60 million US locations and ultra-fast fiber connections to more than 7 million customers in 67 markets. I'm certain of one thing, John Donovan doesn't get to sleep an awful lot. One of the things keeping him awake and most busy currently is AT&T's race to master the full potential of 5G. Recent press reports tell us he's winning. I'm delighted to bring John Donovan to the stage to help us unpack the new realities that come with a mobile-first, hyper-connected, data-driven world. But before John joins us, let's take a look at a video that gives us a sense of the journey we are embarking on with 5G.
Connecting our lives through 5G. will be the next marker in history, with AT&T being the first to introduce standards-based mobile 5G. The future path to healthcare will be more efficient with data transport, near real-time monitoring and diagnosis. It will impact the way we experience large-scale events, enabling more immersive capabilities in the future. Educating and enriching real-world experiences through augmented and mixed reality. Entertaining on a whole new level, engaging the user through interactivity and 3D objects. "5G will be part of AT&T's larger story, having America's best network as the foundation. Perseverance is key, but we are convinced that this is the path to true innovation."
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Donovan. Thank you, John. John, thank you for joining us today. And you know, if I've heard one thing in preparation for CES this year, 5G is really the story that everybody is talking about. And it's in the, I don't want to say how many years, it'll age me, that I've been coming to CES. I think it's the first time there was a true focus on one thing, and that's 5G. So with that, and with what we just saw in the video, I think it's fair to say you're pretty big on 5G. Could you, as I said, help us sort of unpack how it compares to other technologies and other things that you've been involved with?
Sure. There's a bunch of ways to describe the excitement that I have. Like I tell my kids, you know, you have to recognize in your life when you hit these moments where you say, you know, I was there then. These are the stories that you're going to tell your grandkids, and this is it. This is it for networking. This is just very different. And you'd look and say, well, what are those differences in English? The first thing is I was around at AT&T at the launch of the 3G and the 4G network, and in those cases we sat around and we dreamed what might be possible with those networks. But at the end of the day, basically, they were an efficiency business case. I can deliver more packets for less dollars, and therefore customers can consume more for less. And the 4G network really had the device at its center. And so you look at it and you look at how that comes together. The network story was a story of, you know, just bandwidth, throughput, and cost. Customers can do things faster, cheaper. The growth of what they've consumed has gone up dramatically, and the bills haven't. But you look at 5G, and it's nowhere near like that. We started getting calls a few years ago, and people saying, look, I'm about to do something new, and what I've read on 5G, I'm going to do it very differently. So when is it going to be ready, and can you come talk to us? And so we started to get an industry here and there, and then last year it accelerated further. And meantime, we're doing the normal things we do, and then internally we started to say, we should hurry up. Like, we should hurry up. There's not often that there's a transformational demand for a network, because a network at its highest performance is invisible, it's ubiquitous, and the internal thing I say is it's perfectly functioning. It's like oxygen. You only know it by its absence. This one is different because people started to call and say, I can make it lighter, I can make it faster. This network, really simply stated, is not just faster and more efficient, which we've grown to appreciate. It's a real-time network, and so therefore it's a game changer. So
that quantum leap, I mean, you know, you were saying you've been through 3G and 4G. I was running a media agency at the dawn of this century. I love to say that. And we all were running around saying we're Y2K ready. And I love to tell the story about one of our old guys on the team back then. He'd been around forever, and we'd go to meetings to tell clients we were Y2K prepared. And he'd look at me, and there was no script. He'd say, and he called me chief, and he said, Chief, you know, all this noise about Y2K, Y1K was easy. It was a snap. We just moved. That leap from 4G to 5G is that pronounced. I mean, you said it. This was about the device. It's now about the world around the device in a fashion.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because when you start to talk to someone and their area of expertise, whether it's producing films, doing advertising, security, logistics, healthcare, it starts with, can I? And I know that all I have to do is patiently listen, because the answer to it at the end is yes. And this is the yes you can technology. And it's been, I think it's been well thought out. This is the first one that is software centric, that you know, has all of the capabilities of the world around it built into it.
It's good to be in the Department of Yes. That's a good group to be in.
Yeah, yeah. Every once in a while you have to say no.
Yeah, there you go. Well, John, lots of talk in the press, lots of interest in the launch. You launched officially a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk about sort of how that's gone from the standpoint of, you know, consumer, the Department of Yes, people saying can I, and you can say yes, but how's that going? Yeah,
you know, it's interesting because the wireless business in the U.S., you know, every industry develops its characteristics that define it. And the wireless business in the U.S. is fiercely competitive, but it's also one that's born on superlatives. So if you walk the halls of AT&T, you know, you go into these sort of history and legacy thinking, they know that first, biggest, widest, best, everything, you know, is a superlative. And so we were really proud in December that we got a real device that you could buy in a store and a real network in 12 cities, and we got 5G up, commercial, standards-based, and that was a first. And so that first is a foundation that then we build on, and it sets our expectations. And I think we really frustrated our competitors last month when we did so.
Well, I mean, it's fair to say a couple of your competitors seem to get their feathers ruffled a little on that launch. I mean, I've seen some, and this time I'll say noise in the press, you know, in terms of that. And again, it's a hyper-competitive industry, but what's your thought about that over the last couple of 48 hours?
Well, you know, we were here 2 years ago, January of 2017, and we said that we were going to launch this on-ramp to 5G, and we were going to call it 5G Evolution. And everybody within the industries who competes with us didn't like the idea that last night, or the night before last, overnight, the top of your phone now shows a 5GE. And they're saying, oh my goodness, like...
In those 12 markets.
Right, in those, no, in all of the markets, 400 markets, where we have advanced our network, readying it for 5G, because you know, it's that real estate has always been the place that the customer goes to say, what's happening with my network? Just a small piece of real estate. In the very origin days, you look to say, do I have a signal? Am I in coverage? And then when you started to have bills that were coming by the megabyte, you started to look and say, am I in Wi-Fi coverage? And now with unlimited, you don't need to do that. But we felt like we had to give them an indicator that said, you know, your speed now is twice what it was with traditional 4G LTE. And so we have markets now that it's far in excess of that, where we're getting 4, 6, 8 times the speed. And we did some customer research, and they were very, not only amenable, but they were interested in learning when I was on that network experience. And so I think the result of last month beating the industry out and this 5GE launch a couple of days ago, our competitors are frustrated. But you know, I mentioned our industry is fiercely competitive. If I now occupy beachfront real estate in my competitors' heads, that makes me smile.
Well, that's good. You know, and everyone was predicting that California, God forbid, was going to have that earthquake and fall off the rest of the country. They used to say Las Vegas would become beachfront real estate. So maybe here you are.
The landscape can shift. I mean, you know, every company is guilty of building a narrative of how you want the world to work. And I love the fact that we broke our industry's narrative 2 days ago.
Well,
and so they're frustrated, and they're going to do what they do.
Well, evolution leads to revolution, so that's a good thing in most cases. So, as I said in my remarks, and you obviously echoed, the first thing a consumer is going to think about is, gee, my smartphone.
Yeah.
5G in our smartphones.
It won't work that way this time. You know, we have smartphones coming out. We have one that'll be out the first part of this year, and we've announced 2 for this year, and they'll start to come. But the network itself isn't going to be as broad geographically as the average person's going to go and see a consumer benefit. So we've had a drumbeat of announcements of things that we're going to do, which are going to be transformational, but are more business related. So if you go back, wind the clock back a little bit, we announced in the fall that we were going to do robotic manufacturing with Samsung down in Austin. We announced an investment in Magic Leap, because one of the things is virtual reality. This is a game changer, because everything that you normally would make you have a bigger headset can now be done in a network. And I mentioned it's real time, so you don't compromise by putting things in the network. So the form factor on your head becomes very small. So it's a game changer. And so we made an investment in Magic Leap, and we're going to be deploying it on their campus. And their designers and their developers are going to be working on this for a subsequent generation. We announced earlier this week with the Dallas Cowboys, who are just a really great partner and innovator. Those folks are, you know, they in some respects, they're one of our most challenging customers, because they're so creative. And if anybody who goes...
The Redskins feel the same way.
No, they all do. But the thing I'll say, I was at the playoff game this past weekend, and which the Cowboys won, by the way. But all the people that were there had never been there before. They all say the same thing. This isn't just a football game. It's an experience. And the experience includes the replay scoreboard, how the dining is arranged, the in and out arrangements. Just the whole experience is closer to a theme park and a day that's exciting than it is to go merely to a football game. And so they want to innovate and start experiences that are unique for concerts, for the game, for interaction. So you take a couple of these, you put them together, and you say, if I had virtual reality in a fan experience, what might I do? I might be able to experience being in the locker room and get the pregame speech with the team. I think, wow, that's really amazing. So, and we also, the last one I'll mention really quickly, Michael, is, which one I'm very passionate about, is there's a human side of this story in 5G that's big and important. And yesterday, we announced that Rush Hospital in Chicago, we're going to put 5G into the provider hospital and try to completely remake the experience between patient, doctor, and then the information that the doctor needs real time at the point of care to make sure that that patient is getting the best care.
That's obviously extraordinary in terms of...
So if we can just keep this tempo, the consumer stuff, I think, will not only come behind it in a very forceful way, but I think that the things we're talking about here are front burner compared to being able to just simply maybe download a movie a little faster.
Well, and that's interesting because, again, launching first in enterprise, and, you know, again, today, when a consumer looks at AT&T as a brand, you tend to think first of mobility, and sometimes the consumer, not the business population, right, but the consumer population, and I always try to draw the distinction, but always bearing in mind that businesses are people as well, forgets that enterprise side, which is such an important part of the business. Are there other use cases, John, that you can point to? I mean, obviously, healthcare, God knows, important, and VR and AR on the Magic Leap, and we'll hear from Omar from Magic Leap later on the panel. Are there some other use cases that are interesting? You mentioned advertising and you know, marketing. Are there use cases that have been presented at this point? Or
yeah. Well, if you think about an out-of-home billboard, those billboards should not only change the way they do now and be digital the way they are becoming now, they should be relevant to who's driving by at that time. That's a complex transaction in today's world, and that is the kind of thing that real-time networking will allow. And so if you look and you say, I've got 5 cars that are half a mile away, and I want to be able to get that advertising not only targeted, but perfect. That's powerful. But when I say, you say yes to everything, we're working on logistics and autonomous cars and location down to the millimeter and retail applications. And so we're excited because historically, wired and wireless have kind of evolved independently. This is strong enough that it's going to be the wireline evolution for enterprise businesses. The next thing they're going to do in their building is wireless.
So when we were chatting a bit ago, John, you mentioned retail as another use case, another example. I mean, the retail world is in a bit of a existential crisis, some might say, as we chatted earlier, relative to their place in the world in bricks and mortar versus everything being online. Where do you see the use case in retail as they're trying, the retailers who are mighty and strong and standing firm, but they're in some cases maybe fighting for their lives?
Yeah, we went through internally an epiphany on our own retail. And we said, you know, retail was on decline. The total traffic into the stores was going down. A lot of people were doing
in the AT&T retail.
In AT&T retail. And you look at that and you'd say, boy, what can we do ourselves? And what can we technologically enable? And then what we realized is retail's not dead. Bad retail's dead. There's a complete new model that has to take into account things like home delivery. Today, for a mobile phone, 10% of all fulfillment we do with home delivery. So you look and you'd say the gig economy and, you know, these people that deliver food to your door and purchases to your door, you know, mobile phones, we figured out, and you know, we went in just over a year from 0 dead stop to 10% of those being delivered into the home. And you can imagine then you're going to deliver it into the business. And so when you think about that in retail, now all of a sudden, where is your store located? How do you start online, finish in the store? Do you want to go to the store to finish? Do you want to finish at home? Do you want to finish at the office tomorrow? All of those things require intense networking, good data flows, and real-time response. And we've remade our own retail model. And then all of the normal things that you get traditionally with data, like who's shopping, where, when, and how, those things, again, if you're using census data to determine whether you staff your store with, you know, someone who speaks Spanish or English, then you're probably 10 years out of date. And sure. Interestingly, what we learned is there's almost no store where it's uniform during the day and week. So we start to see things like changing the signage and the language in the store by time of day or day of week. And so things have gotten really real time. And so I'm really excited about where retail cases are going as well.
It's interesting because the point you made about a sports experience, a live stadium experience, it's about the experience. It's not just going to the stadium to watch the game. It's like the movie theater. The idea of movie theaters with streaming, it's still the experience of going to that movie theater and having the all-inclusive experience and being part of a crowd, which is, you know, part of that entertainment.
Yeah, I think do for us.
Great. Well, John, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap because we've got a panel that's going to come up and kind of, hopefully not pick apart, but, you know, add some thinking to what how we've set the table here. So I want to take a moment and really thank you for sharing your insights and for helping us make this world around change and make it all happen faster. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'll follow you.
Well, I got to just... on that note, again, thanks to John Donovan, I want to introduce Phil Thomas. I'm proud to say for the last 2 years, a true partner, but for the last 10 years, a good business associate. Phil is the president of Essential Events and the chairman of the Cannes Lions, and Phil's going to bring a group of great folks up here to chat a bit about what we've, as I said, set the table. So, Phil?
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to, as Michael said, I'm the chairman of Cannes Lions, which is the festival that takes place in Cannes every year. And I'm joined by a fantastic panel, and we're going to talk about 5G in its reality. So let me just very briefly introduce the panel. I'm just going to give their names and job descriptions because that is really all you probably need. You can Google their extraordinary careers. But starting at the end, we've got Jill Kress, who's the CMO of National Geographic. We've got Alicia Hatch, who's the CMO of Deloitte Digital. Omar Khan, who's the Chief Product Officer of Magic Leap, which was referred to in the conversation just took place. Anne Lunes, the CMO of Adobe, and Beth Sidhu, who is the COO of the Stagwell Group. So please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. So as Michael said at the beginning of that conversation just now, 5G seems to be the dominant subject at CES this year. And it's certainly been the topic of many interesting conversations. I suppose that the truth is, both at Cannes Lions and here at CES over the years, there's always something that is the talk of the town in any particular year, you know, whether it's AR or VR or the Internet of Things. There's always a buzzword, isn't there? And I suppose I'd like to quickly start to ask each of you whether you feel, and this may be slightly heretical after what we've just heard, but I think we should get it out in the open anyway. And just hear from each of you whether you actually think 5G is a thing that is going to make a difference, or are we all going to be back at CES next year saying, what was all that 5G stuff about? It wasn't really a thing. So I'd just love to hear very briefly whether you're on board with this whole 5G gig or not. So who'd like to start? How about Jill? Let's start with Jill.
Yes, so an enthusiastic yes. I think, you know, it's a matter of understanding the viability of the timeline, but we are incredibly optimistic about what 5G can do to connect us in a more personal way with our audience, and the opportunity that it has for us as a storytelling company to do that in a much more aggressive way at scale. So we're getting ready.
So you're a convert. How about Alicia?
Confident.
Yes, not only is it real, but it's a game changer because like all of the shiny objects that we seem to talk about year after year, or unlike, it's an enabler. It's an enabler of AR and VR. It's an enabler of AI. It will change. Fundamentally upgrade the entire technology system. So it's a platform for innovation that's going to affect the entire economy.
Omar.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm partial to 5G given our the evolution of our technology. It's absolutely real, and it is a game changer. I agree with Alicia. I mean, for us, when we think about spatial computing and mixed reality at Magic Leap, digital experiences have been, you know, compromised and paradigmed into mobile screens, televisions, and where they naturally reside, where people want to experience them, is out in the wild. And they want to experience them at scale. They want to interact with them. They want to be aware. They want to be present with those digital experiences. And spatial computing in Magic Leap removes one compromise, that compromise of taking it away from a screen and putting it back where it belongs spatially. 5G removes the next compromise because it now is untethered to a network or a building or a home. You can start to experience in the wild where it belongs. So the contextual relevance of those digital experiences becomes enormous.
Yeah, so I mean, from an Adobe perspective, our whole mission is around digital experiences. So this is going to be, you know, wonderful for us. I think, you know, all new technology, especially when it's this, I would say, grand, is going to take a while in order to really get fully, across consumer. I think we heard that from John Donovan talking about, you know, commercial applications perhaps being the initial area where we see this. But, you know, the point about immersive experiences, they're not just for the Dallas Cowboys. They're for every brand wants to create that kind of an experience, certainly across entertainment, sports, but also, you know, traditional enterprises.
And Beth?
I mean, it would be much more exciting if a side no.
Yeah, I was just hoping maybe one of the panels was a no.
So enthusiastic, yes, but it's not a light switch. It's not going to turn on tomorrow and glow brightly. In fact, if we're all being candid, it's not going to glow brightly across the country in the same way, on the same timeline. And so I think we just have to acknowledge as marketers and as consumers, and we will all be consumers of 5G, that its promise is going to take some time, and we almost have to nurture it to that point for consumers to be like, oh, okay, I get it. I should be excited. It's not a flash in the pan.
But that's such a good point. We talk about it being real, but it's not here.
Mm-hmm. It's coming.
It's coming. Mm-hmm. And I think the rate at which it's coming is important to consider because, here in the US, we were first adopters of 4G, but right now we're being seriously outpaced by Asia in adoption of 5G. 5G requires a 10-year investment cycle to actually make real, to actually hit critical mass. So we have to be serious about making those investments and truly building it out because it exists, but it has to be deployed.
So, I mean, on that subject, I mean, it's a very good point that I think, other than in Finland, as far as I'm aware, it has not really rolled out at all as yet. So it is really a theoretical tool for the future. But bearing that in mind and bearing what you've all been saying in terms of your excitement about it, how have you, in your own particular businesses, started to look at how you might leverage it? And what kind of things do you think you might be able to do with 5G that 4G just wouldn't allow you? I mean, for instance, Anne, we were talking about video and the possibilities of video, particularly before when we were talking about this.
Yeah. So, I'm a big smartphone and online digital video fan because, more and more you're seeing people spend. I was telling Philip that the most recent statistic I saw is that 70% of people are spending like 3+ hours per day on watching video, and most of that is probably my two boys. But I think there are probably some. There must be some other people doing it, but
that doesn't include linear TV. You told me, right? So that's 3 hours plus, not including linear TV.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think addressable TV is going to be another opportunity there. But to your point about IoT and the ability to essentially have these experiences be universal, whether it's in your vehicle or whether it's on your head. People are talking about lenses where you'll be able to the next iteration of potentially a Google Glass. I think video for us. And video is real now, but we had been talking about video for a long time before it became, so commonplace. I think that is a space where we see people creating enormous amounts of video, and we're coming out with tools now that are not professional but rather consumer oriented. The amount of content that's being consumed, and then the amount of delivery that's required to get that across all the different types of surfaces or devices, that's an immediate kind of benefit that I can see.
Yeah. And how about you guys, in terms of National Geographic? How have you started to think about, and who have you been talking to about the possibilities of 5G, and how do you think it might affect the way that you go to market, or indeed the actual products that you're taking to market?
Yeah, National Geographic has a 130-year legacy in visual storytelling. And I think our ability to create an incredible signal through the noise over all of those years has very much been a result of leaning into what's been next with technology. And so going back to the early 1900s when we augmented our scientific journal with photography, it was leaning into what was next, and it was actually a big, bold move. And it hasn't been a big part of our narrative, but it has been absolutely core to how we have thought about augmenting our storytelling. And so for the last few years, we have been very much focused on how we can create immersive experiences for our viewer, leaning into AR, VR, and doing loads with 360. And so as an entertainment company that is seeking to win the hearts and minds of consumers in this direct-to-consumer world and ensuring that we are providing content worth paying for, there's the hero medium, which may be a traditional video product, but then there is how do you surround that, and how do you take a viewer into that experience with the storyteller, take them to a place in a very experiential way, in a way that only National Geographic can. So one recent example, we have a doc film out in theaters now called Free Solo, which tells the incredible, harrowing journey of Alex Honnold and his free solo climb. So that means climbing without ropes, 3,000 feet to the top of El Capitan. And so we've done a lot to promote that, but one of the really cool experiences we had was an immersive 360 experience, where that is also white knuckling. You know, you're in that experience through the headset, and you literally feel like you are on the side of El Capitan with Alex. And so for us, we're going to continue to ensure that we are leaning into developing that kind of content so that we have it when we can actually, you know, that we're learning and that we're programming and coding so that those types of immersive content extensions can live in a world of 5G where it's scalable, which is really exciting for us.
Could you talk just a little bit more, because that's a really great example, because that is possible now, that's perfectly possible now to create that, isn't it?
Yes.
What are you hearing about the capabilities that 5G will bring to, as you say, scale it or change the experience for the user? How is it going to... Well, it was described as a major game changer in the conversation that's just been had. How do you think, or what have you heard so far about how it might change?
Well, I think the obvious one is scale. And so I can describe that experience. Very few people have actually been able to participate and partake in it. And so the ability to be able to leverage 5G to get that out in a much quicker way, to you know, leveraging bandwidth and getting it out to a mass of devices is really exciting. The other thing that we're excited about is the opportunity for personalization. And I think, you know, with the immense connectivity that will present itself and the ability to actually collect and harness that data to understand, is that experience different for me than it is for Alicia, will allow us to continue to connect with our audience in a way which will continue to help us to become or maintain our relevancy with that audience.
Alicia, is that something?
You know, actually, as marketers, this is a huge point for us in what 5G will actually enable. Of course, it's the immersive experiences. We are all about brand experience, creating experience, and it will certainly enable that at greater scale and with more power and higher fidelity storytelling. But beyond that, what 5G is going to do is allow us to actually access not only this data network effect of having more data, but the truth is that as marketers, for a while now, we've had a lot of data, but all the wrong data. And what I'm most excited about is the ability to connect to and capture emotional data sets for the first time at scale. That, for marketers, is incredibly exciting and powerful. Creative's going to get better. The connection with customers is going to get better. The value you can deliver to your consumers will get so much better. And those emotional data sets, I think, again, then fed into AI. AI is only as powerful as the data you're pumping into it. That then will allow us to get to the personalization Jill's talking about.
Can you explain a bit more what you mean about emotional data sets? What's your definition of that?
Think of all the data we can't capture right now that tells us really everything we need to know. As marketers, we're in the business of influence. And we know through neuroscience over the last 20 years that most decision-making is highly emotional. So what can you learn from the heat that I'm emitting from my hand as I'm watching that video? What about the pheromones that are coming out of my forehead or the way my retina is responding? You can learn a lot more about the effectiveness of your content, the effectiveness of your experience, when you're optimizing based on emotional data versus just clicks and other
Screen time and
things.
engagement.
Yeah, right, these
and,
type of
yeah.
inferior metrics. We've only just begun.
I think there's also a contextual element to it, and which I think is intertwined with what you're talking about. And again, when you have these multiple different opportunities to collect information about behaviors that people have when they're in different situations, even in the case of National Geographic, when you're at home, let's say, and you're having an experience versus when you might be in some kind of a park or whether you're in the workplace, you know, your response to that kind of experience is going to be different, and it's going to be measured based on the context. And that's something that we do a lot at Adobe, trying to understand when you're wearing your consumer hat, how are you responding to content, or how are you creating content? When you're wearing your professional hat, how are you doing it? And how then do we kind of interact with you so that it's much more contextually relevant?
And Omar, sorry, but just to put the context, I think you're right at the very pointy bit of all of this, aren't you? And I think AT&T have invested in Magic Leap as well. So can you talk a little bit more about how 5G might be, and maybe just for the audience, explain a little bit more about Magic Leap?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, obviously we're you know, developing our platform both from a hardware and software perspective to deploy spatial computing in partnership with AT&T, but we're also working in conjunction with developers, creators, retailers, marketers to help take their experiences and start to deploy them where they naturally belong. You know, out interacting with scale, being aware, respecting the user, respecting the physical environment. We're deploying a new reality. So for us, we're very careful by not defining the word real as physical. Right? The new reality is actually the digital and the physical world coexisting together. And that's what we expect. So when we're out shopping or walking the streets, we should be able to shop the world. Right? Everything should be for sale. And there should be context about everything that we see. And we naturally ask questions about everything that we see. And if I'm wearing our spatial computer, not only does the device see what I see, but it knows how I feel about what I see. Right? So contextually, from a sentience perspective, I can be much more real time about presenting the user with choices and recommendations if that user decides to choose to share their live stream, because that data is incredibly personal, right? That live stream that we're collecting is incredibly personal. It's owned by the user. So if they choose to share it, then that ability to be enriched by that information that's contextually relevant at that moment from a low latency, immediate response perspective is incredibly valuable. And so we're actually going to be working right now with AT&T to deploy 5G on our campus in Fort Lauderdale. And so we're going to start to trial those 5G using our product and platform at our headquarters.
To Beth's point, though, earlier on, in terms of this is not real yet, it's a future thing. From your point of view, this amazing experience that you've just described and this future that we can look forward to, how far away is that?
It's imminent. I mean,
what does imminent mean? Can you be more specific?
Frankly, we're doing it today. We're working on test sites today. We're working on starting to deploy what we call Magicverse, which is how does this digital world exist in the physical space, and how do these experiences persist? There's no reason that if you create a digital asset, that digital asset should sit in a library after it leaves the theater. Exactly. Movies are encoded, and content is encoded for Dolby Atmos and IMAX. But once it leaves, it goes to this screen, and 99% of content is consumed on a 5-inch screen now. There's no reason that content at scale shouldn't reside in the wild. We've created the assets. They should go out there and people should be able to interact with them at scale, right? There's no reason, I remember John talking at our conference, there's no reason Los Angeles or Vegas shouldn't be Gotham, right? The characters that Warner Media, right? And so this is the 80th anniversary of Batman this year. There's no reason cities shouldn't become Gotham, and you should be able to interact with characters on the street. right? You should be able to interact with them wherever you want in your home. So unlocking those digital assets and experiences to exist in the physical world, that's something we're doing today.
It's a bit like Gotham already,
and
though.
5G what 5G will do is accelerate that from a ubiquity perspective.
Okay.
Because we're deploying those experiences today where the bandwidth exists, right? Which is within buildings or within Wi-Fi hotspots or Wi-Fi zones. 5G is going to expand the environment from a ubiquity perspective where we can have that anywhere we want it.
And Beth, you were saying that you were putting a certain amount of realism into the conversation. You're saying it's not here yet, there's some time. What's your kind of time frame, and have you been working on use cases as well?
So our companies are working on 5G applications right now for brands, and there's sort of two sides of the coin that we're seeing. So you have this amazing coming opportunity, but for a consumer in terms of touching and feeling it, it's hard to get your brain around, and people might think, oh, I want to walk down the streets of Gotham, but what does that mean? How do you get them to crave it? How do you get them to go and seek it from a brand? I think that's an interesting challenge that brands have in bringing it to life. At the same time, I think, and I don't want to be the naysayer in this again, but if you have more choices, more personalization, more pieces of data, more modalities, more ways that you're experiencing a brand, as a marketer, we have to be incredibly careful that our use of 5G doesn't create the consumer version of analysis paralysis. Do I want 15 versions of everything? Do I have the ability to sort through what that means about my relationship with a brand, about what it stands for, about what it doesn't stand for? And so I think our companies right now are really engaged in delivering that authentic 5G brand experience without accidentally muddying what the brand is about with this new piece of technology.
Yeah, Alicia, would you agree with that? That there can be, you can have too many data points. There can be too much, you know, it can be too much to be able to handle. And let's be honest, at the moment, most marketers can't really manage the data they've already got. Do you really need more data?
So enter AI. That's where we can start processing through and getting to personalization and deciding what's worth it and deciding what's not without actually looking at the report manually and trying to make those decisions across 15 versions or 150 versions. So I think that's also a parallel innovation that will enhance our ability as marketers to really use the data effectively at great scale and in a personalized way.
You know,
sorry, please.
There are these two sides to amazing technological invention. So one of the things that 5G should do is open up a whole suite of creative opportunities that we can't imagine right now. We should be able to do things visually and graphically that have never been possible before. At the same time, 5G should allow us to have way more AI, way more good bots, way more machine learning. And so as a marketer, how do you balance the beautiful graphical possibilities and the AI, hard science, machine learning? That's going to be an incredibly challenging place for marketers to walk. And I'm very excited about it, but I don't think we should skip the fact that it's going to be a challenge and that we have to be smart about what 5G is and what it could be.
Are there any other challenges? Actually, Jill, go ahead.
And what that means from a skill set that is required of marketers. And we've talked a lot this week about the balance of the right brain and the left brain. And marketing has always been a performance-driven function, but it is going to become more and more performance-driven because we are going to have more real-time data, and being able to ensure that the marketing acumen is growing to actually be able to deliver on the opportunities that level of performance-driven marketing will provide to us.
Omar had a point, I think.
I think at Magic Leap, we're focusing on human-centered AI because AI has to be human-centered in order for us to enhance what we do. I mean, this ability for the worker of the future to be the worker, the citizen of the future, their ability to unlearn, because all of this information is available to them real time. And the ability to process that information on a real-time basis to learn a new skill set, that's what human-centered AI can offer us, right?
Yes.
So when you talk about devices like spatial computers, and when you talk about human-centered AI, it enhances our ability to execute and to renew our skill set on a real-time basis. I mean, we see it even today, right? People can learn how to do something off of YouTube. Imagine being able to use both AI, spatial computing, and mixed reality to bring that together so I can learn a new skill set without having to be trained on the spot. So I can have access to to the best teachers of piano from Juilliard, or the best airplane mechanics from Boeing in Seattle. And that's something I can execute on a daily basis without necessarily having gone through 30 years of training for it.
Yeah. I was going to make the point just about 5G not being able to be successful unless parallel technologies mature.
Absolutely.
Because being able to create content, we've been talking about AR and VR for a long time, and those are becoming now commercially viable, but not at the pace perhaps as we might have originally thought. And so those have to mature in parallel. AI, which is being used in all types of commercial applications, that will continue, and machine learning will need to continue to advance for 5G really to be fully viable and usable, because you need to be able to author content to be universal across all different kinds of devices. You need to be able to capture the data, synthesize it, and then act upon it and personalize the experiences and make them immersive across all these different types of surfaces.
And
I wonder if I could ask. Oh, sorry, Emma, go ahead.
The data that we're dealing with is only, it's rising exponentially.
Yeah.
Right, sitting in servers, sitting in the cloud. The ability to visualize data naturally where you can make the best decisions and act on that data, whether it's the emotional data sets that we're talking about or IoT data sets, endpoint data, being able to then visualize that data in physical space so that I can actually either be navigated the right way or make the right decisions or focus on the right piece of equipment or understand context about something I may be looking at and whether or not it matches something in my closet back at home. So ability to visualize that data where it naturally belongs is a huge step forward, and I think addresses some of the points that you talked about.
I mean, it does bring a humanity to data if you can touch it and feel it in a way that it is simply not possible right now.
I wonder if we could, and just in case we run out of time, I want to finish with, I may come back to another question, but I want to ask this question first, because you guys clearly have given a lot of thought to this whole thing. You are, to various degrees, already doing things to prepare for the arrival of 5G. If there's anybody in the audience that maybe hasn't quite got up to speed yet, in terms of that, and they might be attending CES, and this is the first time they've really had their eyes open to the possibility that 5G might bring. I wonder if we could just go along the panel, and could you just give a little bit of advice about two things? The first thing would be, where should people start to, where would you advise them to start to look to learn about it? Who should they talk to start to learn about it? And then if you could give them maybe a piece of advice about what to just be aware of, to keep in the back of your mind, to ensure that you don't make the wrong move. So you've already started thinking about it, started looking at what it might do. So how could people find more? Who should they talk to? What partners should they talk to? And what piece of advice would you give them as we're piling into this amazing new future that you've all described? So where should I start? I'll start with Jill.
Yeah, I think that one of the key things that's going to continue to evolve with 5G, as it has been with all technology, has been the importance of partnerships. And I think ensuring that, from a learning standpoint, I think, what's happening today from AT&T and Verizon are certainly, I think, companies where we're all going to be focused on to see what's happening and where is scale possible, where are those environments where it's going to start to be feasible. But what are those really interesting partnerships that are going to come together to actually ensure that we're doing all of the things that we talked about, ensuring that technology related to the use cases presented by 5G are developing at the right pace. I was really intrigued by the announcement yesterday between Disney and Verizon, and I think we're going to continue to see more of that on how companies with different differing skill sets and points of view on this are going to come together to deliver optimal experiences.
Fantastic. Alicia?
So I think it can be overwhelming when something is big and unknowable for the average marketer as 5G comes along. It's tempting to try to actually understand the technology itself, but what I'd say is look more at the implications of the technology and the applications directly in your space and boil it down to how is it practical and practical now. Our mobile consumer study this year said, I thought it was just a staggering insight, that we're going from a world over the next year where we have 2 to 3 mobile devices each to a world where we have 40 to 100 each attached to us in some way. So if you think about in the future, we talk about omni-channel, an omni-channel world. The air is the new channel, right? And you think about experience much more broadly. I think it will inspire rather than terrify you, which I think is important in a world of very fast-paced innovation.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Omar?
Yeah, I think Alicia hit the exact right point. You got to think about the application. So I think what we naturally do is we put limitations on ourselves when we think about applications within our businesses, because we're like, well, you know what? I've only got a 13-inch screen. I've only got a 5-inch screen, or I've only got 50 megabits of bandwidth, or I've got certain pipe limitations or storage limitations. I think what we've got to do, and I think the challenge that we all need to embrace is think about what the applications are that are unshackled. Right? Unshackle your minds from bandwidth limitations or ubiquity limitations or latency limitations or scale limitations, and start to think about applications within your business or your environment or at home that don't have those limitations naturally placed on them. And because that's the world that we're in now. That's the world that we're headed, enabled by 5G, spatial computing, mixed reality, IoT, all of this stuff coming together is removing those limitations. And actually the biggest challenge that we see is removing those paradigms from developers and creators and helping them sort of unshackle their thinking. Because every experience that we experience today, communication, collaboration, entertainment, all started spatially. It was all mapped to this screen, right? It was all mapped to that screen because of accessibility, portability. And now we're going to have to kind of unshackle that paradigm and get rid of it and bring it back into it existing in its natural state. So I piggyback on what Alicia said, which is start to think about those applications, but remove those limitations from your thinking. And that's what 5G enables. That's what spatial computing enables. That's what all of these ubiquitous sensors enable.
Amazing.
I think, I totally agree. It's like identify the use case that's going to be most applicable to you, and maybe start small, because I think these things seem so grand and frightening because they seem like they are going to be ubiquitous and you're not going to be able to have jumped on the train early enough. And I know at Adobe, we typically take a pilot or a project and we try to make sure that we can do it, at a small scale. We did a great project with some San Francisco artists where we invited 10 of them in to participate in an augmented reality project. And they each created a piece of artwork, and then we, using Project Arrow, which is a new AR authoring tool that we have, invited them to immerse themselves in the creation that they had made. And did it on a tablet. They captured the creation that they had, and then they actually went into that creation. And this is a small, not massively commercial application, but it showed that we could get it done. And so I think when you have some of those quick wins in, kind of bounded circumstances, you start to gain the confidence that you can do this at a much broader scale.
Fantastic advice. And Beth?
I think you have to focus like a laser on the relationship that you want to have with your consumer, the one you have today, the one you want to have. To date, more computing power has given us the ability to offer more and more choice, more and more options. And I think the challenge for marketers is to resist using 5G as just another way to offer a whole lot more options, but actually as a way to offer a new connection with your consumer, a new potential consumer to be part of your brand, to not just unshackle yourself, I think that's the theme of this conversation. But to go a little step further, what can we do that we haven't thought of to get to our consumer?
That's very good. Thank you very much indeed, and wonderful advice. I think the short version of this talk is 5G is not here yet, but it is definitely a thing. I think that is definitely the agreed conclusion of the panel. But what a fantastic panel. Thank you very much for your attention, and please thank the panel very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.